talk to discuss.
It was really helpful. It's like almost like part of our life, days of our life. Every day we're dealing with the nutrition in the hospital. Not only hospital, sometimes in the house, even in the house, like hospice patients. So very informative and so useful for us, all of us, in all specialty. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Our schedule, thank you.
Software আছে টেলিফোনে
On COVID, the histopathological features of the COVID. So we know the coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2, is a zoonotic disease, causes the COVID infection, and it's continuing to spread all. It started from Wuhan, China, spread all over the world. It's still spreading and causing a devastating consequences all over the world. So the infection ranges from asymptomatic to mild, moderate respiratory and non-respiratory symptoms to severe COVID pneumonia and ARDS with multi-organ failure. It can cause the post-COVID syndrome or long COVID. The complex clinical pictures, we know how complex it is. It's very difficult virus. Now it's a novel virus, and it damages and attack the human body in multiple directions. So it also elicits the human host response, triggers a wide ranging of immunoinflammatory, thrombotic, and parenchymal derangement. So the effects of the COVID on the nervous system. The nervous system, we are going to start from the nervous system because it's on the top of our body. So the nervous system is frequently involved in hospitalized patients with COVID, and the SARS-CoV, we know, it uses the ACE2 receptors, and it's also present in the brain, especially in the brain vessels, pericytes, smooth muscles in the vascular wall, choroid plexus, and neocortical neurons. So what are the manifestations? I'm just going to highlight on it. I'm not going to discuss in details on the manifestations. It can cause the ischemic stroke, and in earlier stage of the corona, we have seen a lot of young patients came with an unusual embolic stroke without having any underlying problem or comorbidities. And in the subsequent stages, they reported and also we see elderly patients, they came with the stroke and with the underlying multiple vascular comorbidities or other comorbidities. And COVID related hypercoagulability, which we know that increases the susceptibility to the cerebrovascular events. Autopsy series shows widespread microthrombi and patches of the infection in some brains. It can cause the encephalopathy and the encephalitis, and it affects majority of the critically ill COVID patients, especially with the ARDS. So several COVID-19 patients meet the diagnostic criteria for infectious encephalitis. So what are they? They usually presented with the altered mental status, fever, seizure. WBC was present in the CSF, and neuroimaging showed some focal brain abnormalities, and that goes in favor of encephalitis. And they reported 2 cases, and they detected the COVID virus in the CSF, which is not very common, is very unusual and very uncommon. And in one COVID-19 case, they found actually a temporal lobe encephalitis in biopsy report. But a lot of the autopsy cases, they could find the virus either in the brain tissue or in the CSF. The potential routes of the brain entry. So there are several potential routes of entry for the COVID virus, but 2 accepted, proposed and also accepted as a route of entry. Number 1 is the olfactory route, and we know the loss of smell is very common symptoms in COVID, and is also part of the neurological manifestation. And MRI showed some increased signals in the olfactory cortex, which goes in favor of the infection. Another one is the blood-brain barrier. It's the commonest route of the entry of the virus into the brain. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it requires internalization and transport of the virus across the cerebral endothelium. Another thing is the hypothalamus, and they think this is the main target and the main culprit of the immune dysregulations. What are they? So potential role of the hypothalamic adrenal, hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis in the immune system is responsible for the dysregulations in the COVID infection. The cytokine and the SARS-CoV-2 virus enter into the median eminence of the hypothalamus, lead to the activation of the autoimmune nervous system and releases the adrenal catecholamines and steroid. And these neurohormonal effectors could act on the bone marrow to release the immunosuppressor neutrophils and myeloid cells as described in the COVID infection, leading to immunosuppression and lymphopenia, which is very common in COVID infection. It also releases the calprotectin and cytokines from damaged lung. It could contribute to the emergency in myelopoiesis. And we can see the pictures that how it regulates. The neuropathological findings of a patient with a COVID is a systemic review. It's a broad literature. It's a broad literature research was done for published articles reported in the histopathological findings of the brain in patients with COVID-19 in PubMed by Medline, Embase, Central by the Cochrane Library and Scopus from December 31st, 2019 to October 31st, 2020. And they involve they reviewed 10 case series, 2 case reports, and on retrospective cohort and on prospective cohort. And age of the patients were 38 to 90, and most of them were more than 65 years old. The striking pathologic changes were diffuse edema, 17%, gliosis with diffuse activation of the microglia and astrocytes, 50 to 35.6%. Infarction of the cortical and subcortical areas of the brain, it was 2.9%. Intracranial hemorrhage, including subarachnoid hemorrhage and punctate hemorrhage, it was 12.4%. Atherosclerosis was 29%. Hypoxic ischemic injury was 28.1%, signs of inflammation 35.6%, the cause of death was attributed to the cardiorespiratory. The neuropathological findings in the brain of the patients, also they did the immunochemical staining and for the astrocytic marker GFAP, and it showed the variable degrees of reactive astrogliosis. And they also did the immunochemical staining, which showed the microgliosis, reactive activation of the microglia and occasional microglial nodules in the medulla oblongata and in the cerebrum. I will show you the picture. The staining for the cytotoxic T lymphocyte, especially for CD8, which is cytotoxic, and it reveals the perivascular and they found the perivascular and parenchymal infiltration with the CD4 positive cells. Here is the picture. We can see the brown color one, where we can see the CD4. Actually, I say type was CD68. It would be CD8. CD8 cells. So we can see the CD8 cells in the brown color area and in the different part of the brain, and different CNS in the upper part of the medulla oblongata, and the hematoxylin eosine, that is on the other side, the blue color, and also positive for CD8 cells. And here is the different part of the brain sections. The upper part is the frontal cortex, and we see the GFAP, that is stood for gliosis and other parenchymal cells, and actually hematoxylin eosine. Okay, all right. So anyway, we can see like in a different part of the microglia, astrocytes, and the CD4, which are responsible for the brain damage. Now moving to cardiovascular manifestation and histopathology of the COVID infection. So COVID infection, it can causes the cardiovascular complications. The commonest are acute MI or acute coronary syndrome, stress cardiomyopathy, arrhythmias, cardiogenic shock, and cardiac arrest. The COVID-19 with cardiovascular comorbidities have higher mortality and severity of the diseases, the mortality and morbidities. A retrospective study is a single center case series of 187 patients with COVID. They found patients with underlying cardiovascular disease were more likely to have the cardiac injury compared with the patients with no underlying cardiovascular disease, 54% versus 13%. And in hospital mortality, it was 7.6% for the patient without having any underlying cardiovascular disease, 13.3% with cardiovascular disease. This is the mortality, 13.3% with cardiovascular disease without troponin, and 37.5% without cardiovascular disease, without underlying cardiovascular disease, but the elevated troponin, so mortality goes higher. It was 37.5%, and mortality was 69% with cardiovascular disease and elevated troponin. So pathophysiology of the cardiac injuries, more than 75% of the myocardial cells have ACE2 receptor, and that is the receptor for the COVID virus, and enter into the cardiomyocytes and causes direct cardiotoxicity. The mechanism of the cardiovascular injury from the COVID virus is multifactorial. Number one is, I mentioned, the direct injury and cardiotoxicity, and they also found the virus particles in the myocardium, so that that favors that goes in favor of the direct cardiotoxicity from this virus. And the virally driven hyperinflammation and cytokine release can lead to vascular inflammation, plaque instability, myocardial inflammation, hypercoagulable state, and direct myocardial suppressions. Other systemic consequences of the COVID, such as sepsis, DIC, may also mediate the cardiac injury. This is whatever I mentioned, that this is the summary in the picture. Like we can see the direct inpatient cardiotoxicity, then hypoxemia mediated, also put in some pressures on the heart, supply demand mismatch, cytokine storm, and the DIC, and it can cause acute coronary syndrome, arrhythmia, venous thromboembolism, myocarditis, heart failure, and cardiogenic shock. The association of cardiac infection with COVID-19 confirmed COVID autopsy cases. This is an autopsy report. So, a study population, the cohort study that included 39 autopsy cases with the cardiac tissue collected from the patients, and that was done in Germany with confirmed COVID infection. The primary endpoint was to evaluate the presence of COVID in the myocardial tissue from the autopsy cases, and to document a possible cardiac response to that infection. The key findings were median age was 85 years, ranged from 78 to 89, and 23 people were women. Pneumonia was the cause of death in 35 patients, that means 89%, more than 89%. And COVID virus was documented in the cardiac tissue, 24 out of the 39 patients, that means 61%. Viral load was more than 1,000 copies in 16 out of 39 patients. The cytokine response panel was increased in 16 patients compared with the 15 patients without COVID infection in the heart. The comparison of the 15 patients without cardiac infection, 15 patients with 16 patients with high viral load reveals the no inflammatory cell infiltrates or difference in the leukocyte numbers. The autopsy revealed the surprising cardiac changes in COVID-19 patients. The autopsies first reported from US, conducted on 22 patients, died of COVID-19 at University Medical Center in New Orleans. The majority were African American people, and 10 were male, 12 are female patients, age range 44 to 79. And majority had hypertension, half of the patient had diabetes type 2, and 41 was obese. In the LSU, Louisiana State University Health, New Orleans pathologists found viral infection of some of the endothelium, and that was enough to cause the dysfunction leading to individual cell death. The effect of the cytokine storm associated with COVID may also play a big role. So this is a picture where we can see the multisystem is a microscopic thrombosis or common, including the intracardiac arteries and arterioles. We can see that picture here. This is a thrombus. Even in the small arteries, the vessels, there we can see the thrombus. And a small intramyocardial vessels contain microthrombi in 6 patients, and it contains the fibrin platelets and a mixture of both. Here is another autopsy report, and we can see this is a small neutrophils in a collection within the small vessels, the blue arrow we can see on the top, and a clump of the endothelial cells, yellow arrow, this is the endothelial cells, and a single perivascular dying myocytes, blue arrow, arrowhead, we can see there is dying. And at the bottom panel, single myocyte undergoing degenerations, the blue arrowhead, we can say, and a clump of endothelial cells, the yellow arrowhead. So it's on the top and on the bottom. And on the other side, on the right hand side, is the electron microscopy, and they saw the viral particles, the round head with the arrowhead in the myocytes. With the cardiac endothelial cells, within the cardiac endothelial cells. In the pulmonary pathology. It's a multi-institutional autopsy cohort from Italy and the New York City. So, just like in a small introduction that we know, ACE2 receptor is present in the alveolar cells, bronchial epithelium, vascular endothelium. And COVID with the ARDS, many patients retain high level of respiratory compliance in spite of the severe hypoxemia, which is very atypical for any kind of ARDS. Radiology, you can see organizing pneumonia in earlier phases. Pulmonary pathology, COVID-19 ARDS has different histologic features than those typically seen in the non-COVID ARDS, non-COVID ARDS. Results. Systematically, they evaluated the lung of the 68 autopsies from the 3 institutions, 2 in USA, 1 in Italy. And the cohort of 47 was male, 21 was female, median age was 73 years, ranged from 30 to 96. The comorbidities were 60% had 3 pre-existing comorbidities such as diabetes, hypertension, coronary artery disease, CKD, COPD, and or dementia. The most common symptoms at onset were shortness of breath, 80%, fever, 65%, cough, 47%. Majority presented with respiratory failure during the hospitalization. Results. The ultra-structurally small vessels showed basal membrane reduplications, significant endothelial swelling with cytoplasmic vacuolation. In subset of the cases, they found the virus in the airway epithelium and are tied to pneumocytes. The viable virus is a positive lung culture associated with hyaline membrane formations, and usually happens within the 2 weeks, but up to 4 weeks after the initial diagnosis. And COVID-19 pneumonia is a heterogeneous disease. It includes the tracheobronchitis, diffuse alveolar damage, and vascular injury. The pulmonary vasculature with capillary microthrombi inflammation as well as microthrombi are common. Viral infection, ongoing active injury contributes to the persistent and temporarily 7%. There was no significant association between the large airway inflammations, acute or chronic inflammations, and intubations. No significant relationship were seen between large airway inflammations and acute bacterial or fungal pneumonia. This is the gross pathology. Lung pathology is a lung. We can see the right lung with weight about 1.1 kg and showed diffuse consolidations. And the pattern of the patchy areas of the gray, white, and consolidations were, it's a frequent findings. It's a gross lung pathology. Microscopic evaluation, airway inflammations, alveolar zone with hyaline membrane tied to pneumocytes, hyperplasia were more common. Less frequently found interstitial fibroblastic proliferations with fibromyxoid stroma, organizing pneumonia, squamous metaplasia, and alveolar wall acute inflammation. Pneumocyte 2 cell hyperplasia and interstitial fibroblastic proliferations more identified with longer duration of illness. Diffuse hyaline membrane formations are present with both short and long duration of diseases with average days of illness less than 15 days. 9 patients without hyaline membrane They found the 5 had acute inflammation of the alveolar wall, 3 had schedule or main pulmonary artery emboli, and 1 had cardiac disease and little pulmonary involvement. The pathology findings, the typical diffuse alveolar damage with hyaline membranes, typical pneumocyte 2 cell hyperplasia were present in 87% of the patients. The pneumocytes, it were atypical, enlarged, sometimes multinucleated with syncytial features as well as basophilic intracytoplasmic inflammations are present. Organizing pneumonia are present, 34% cases. Squamous metaplasia, 43% patient, it was present in 43% of the patients with longer duration of the disease. The ranges of 5 to 7 days and 5 to 30 days respectively. Tracheobronchitis, it was frequently present, independent from the incubation as tuberculous, bacterial or fungal infection. The late phase of the diffuse is diffuse alveolar damage. It was less frequent and correlated with longer duration of illness. Large vessel thrombi, it was present in 42% of cases. Platelet and fibrin microthrombi are present focally in 84% of cases. So this is the picture of the alveolar damage, diffuse alveolar damage with the morphological features in acute stage. We can see the exudative phase. It occurs in the first week after the pulmonary injury, followed by the organizing or proliferative phase. Some authors additionally include a final proliferative and fibrotic stage. I'll show you the slide. At this acute exudative phase, we can show intraalveolar edema and interstitial widening. This is the bad organizing phase. Cellular, we can see some changes. Cellular fibroblastic proliferations, which displays in a loose and myxoid appearance. We can see in the hematoxylin eosin staining of the tissue. And type 2 pneumocyte hyperplasia and squamous metaplasia. We see the thickness of the lining is. Hyaline membrane disappears and become integrated into the alveolar septa. Residual fibrin rest can be identified. Anyway, this is organizing phase. After the organizing phase, some of the cases of the DAD resolve gradually, while others can develop interstitial fibrosis with interstitial remodeling. However, the most survivors experience some kind of residual functional impairment, and this is the fibrotic stage. The less common encountered histologic features: a young collagen with features of organizing pneumonia, squamous metaplasia in the alveolar space. Alveolar wall injury with neutrophils and endothelial injury was seen in a subset of early disease, of COVID infection. But it's not very common findings. The vascular injury in COVID lung. So the gross image showing the multiple thrombi. We can see the gross, and in addition to the large, the thrombi, smaller caliber arteries showing a fibrin thrombi on the right hand side. The picture number C, we can see the fibrin and thrombi. And picture number D, we can see thrombi were predominantly composed of platelets and seen in the capillary bed. The figure number E, picture E is electron microscopic pictures. Endothelial basement membrane was diffusely reduplicated at higher magnification. Some of the viral particles are present in the endothelial cell cytoplasm. And this is endothelial cells are swollen and showed the numerous instances of cytoplasmic vacuolation. We can see on the right hand side, this is the picture. Ancillary studies for tissue-based viral detection. So the immunohistochemistry for the viral spike protein in the tracheal epithelium. In the figure A, we can see the viral particles were present. In the figure B, the slide B, we can see RNA for the viral spike protein, RNA were present. In the number 3, the slide number 3, C. Immunohistochemistry of the viral spike protein in the hyaline membrane and in the adjacent cell. And in the D, we see the viral spike protein RNA in the same area of a serial sections. 40 minutes. Gone. Oh, all right. Okay, almost done, almost there. Electron microscopy showing viral particles measuring. So we can see the viral particles were there actually, and a culture was positive. So this is a gross, this is the findings in the trachea. You can see the inflammation, gross photography, and we can see the microscopically, we can see the lesions in the ulcerations with acute and chronic inflammation. Some of them are associated with necrosis and fibrin. The microscopic findings, the patterns of the acute respiratory distress syndrome, I'm going to skip that one. And then renal histopathological analysis in the 26 post-mortem findings of the patients with COVID. The incidence of AKI, acute kidney injury in COVID, it ranges from 0.9% to 29% in different centers. Kidney injury related, relatively less COVID infections compared with the other ARDS or other, compared with the MERS or hantavirus infection. So in 26 patients with COVID, they found 19 were male and 7 were female. Average age was 69. 26 had COVID positive PCR and also had characteristics radiological alterations in the lung. And 11 patients had, I think my slides are mixed up. I did not include in these slides. Let me skip it up. So the microscopic findings, the light microscopic findings in the proximal ATI, the loss of brush border, vacuolar degenerations, dilatations of the tubular lumen and cellular debrises, occasional frank necrosis, detachment of the epithelium and bare tubular basement membrane are present. In acute pyelonephritis, with multiple foci of bacteria, diffuse polymorphonuclear cast and lumen of the tubules are present. Diffuse RBC aggregation and obstructions are present in peritubular and glomerular capillaries without distinct fragmentation of the
certificate instantly will get
5 hours in the
Apple certificate.
Ball is going to talk about role of imaging in dementia. Dr. Chaudhary is a staff neuroradiologist and ex-chairman of radiology and medical imaging at Edmundston Regional Hospital in Canada. He is a clinical professor of diagnostic radiology at University of Sherbrooke, Quebec, Canada, and he is extensively involved in radiology teaching program in Indo-Pacific and Southeast Asian countries. So I'm going to invite Dr. Iqbal Chaudhary. He is also my senior brother from Sylhet Medical College. He graduated from Sylhet Medical College. Thank you so much. Dr. Chaudhary, please.
And almost everyone above the age of 85 will develop some form of Alzheimer's dementia. Normal advanced age brain atrophy. In Alzheimer's disease, liver dementia, as well as frontotemporal dementia, atrophy changes are accelerated but remain very unspecific. About 5, treatable my presentation today will be particularly focused on sleep. In the end of my presentation, however, I will mention this is a 59-year-old patient complaining of gradual onset of memory, trouble for 6 weeks, urinary incontinence, and gait disturbance. CT shows marked hydrocephalus and you can see disproportionate ventricular dilatation and sulfur hydrocephalus. Typical clinical.
আমার এগুলো আসে নাই আপনার ছবিগুলো যায় নাই না ঠিক আছে জাফর ভাই মুজিব ভাইয়ের নাম দিয়ে আপনার
Okay, New York chapter has sued somebody and Dr. XY has sued somebody, but look at the profile, the people that who sued, because they have the courage, because they tell the truth. That's why they have the ability to take the leadership, they have the ability to say something, so they stood up. It doesn't mean that they are behind the organization or they want to dip down to the organization. No, they are carrying their flags and they are going to go in the future. One more thing I want to tell you, sadly, I should have said before, during this pandemic, we learned many lessons. During this pandemic, we lost our friends, we lost our colleagues, we lost our brother, father, mother, relatives, neighbors. And that was heartbreaking. In the pandemics, it really touched down our heart. So my greatest sympathy goes to the families who lost their loved one. And during this pandemics, if you see the overview, look what we have done. During this pandemic, we are all united. We unified ourselves, different. For it, you have to do it, you have to accomplish it, and let's go for this. My expectation for the future is unveiled for not reasonable, it is not unreasonable to create and unify one Bimana under one umbrella. However, God probably kept that path, hoping still we can create two more leadership who can provide again a dynamic leadership with Bimana yet to see a unifier, not a divider. So I request all of you to stand up and build a strong Bimana for future. I'll take some few questions, if you have any questions.
No, Yusufbhai, on the question of unifying it into one Bimana, I think my comment is that from the get-go, you have seen after the Michigan election, the executive committee has been two camps. And they have done all activities under the name of Bimana as something, partition, right? And they have done it one after another. So that was their activity. So we didn't find any unity in any of their activities, right? So, and now their notion is that let Bimana be divided, we don't care, right? So do you have any suggestion in this crisis how we can think of unifying the Bimana into one?
I'll just say one thing, and then I'm going to ask Dr. Mujib to go as a member at large to also discuss a few things.
Okay.
But what I think, before 2012, the platform of Bimana was family room bound. It was decided in the family room. After 2012, the real democracy came in. They felt powerless because they cannot select their future leaders. So the percentage of this, I took a deep thought about it. It's 1 to 2% only. 20 people managing, they are trying to again go up the ladders and so prove that we are what we established the Bimana, and we are going to be the leader, and we are going to say what we're going to do. So this is 1 to 2% only. 99% of the people wants the same Bimana, same organization united from. And if you do a really voting, and you will see I'm correct. Okay?
So answer to your question is that if we are thinking, if we are like in a prospective thinking that we want to unify it into another strong Bimana, then I think as we see in the Vibrant group, the general members are speaking out. Now we have to bring and unite all those general members, and maybe we should do a GM sooner or later to give their verdict. General members have no place now to give that thing. So
I-
that could be a future plan.
So I want one of you to propose a resolution to be adopted that we should send emails to all the general members. Is Bimana be divided or undivided? That's it. One simple question. So
The
one.
answer doesn't complete.
But this is.
The answer will be yes, but the process will be zero.
Let me.
That's why, I'm not asking a question, I'm just suggesting. The answer will be yes, overwhelmingly yes. And the process to do that, zero, nil. You cannot do it. Lot of people supported you, us. Lot of people. Where are they?